Well, first of all, I'm sure from the Fed's point of view, it's well managed.
Okay.
They're not going to tell you any different. Secondly, yes, the loans are supposed to be paid back. But if the banks go bankrupt, they won't get paid back. Or how long will it take for them to pay it back? The American taxpayer has lent out in cash through the Fed and through the Treasury Department $12.7 trillion to brokerage firms, banks, insurance companies in America, and you know about the automobile industry. And then on top of that, they have lent out tremendous amounts of money to the European Central Bank and other banks throughout Europe, including the Bank of England. They've also made a $500 billion swap, this is the Fed, with the 5 major European currencies. And for that, they took their currencies, and the Europeans took U.S. dollars, which the Fed made up out of thin air. Their bookkeeping entries, they said, the magic wand is here, and there's $500 billion, you guys. You take that, and you give us $500 billion of your currency, and I'm sure that they did that magic wand trick as well. And what do they do with that money? The Fed takes the foreign currencies and feeds them into the foreign currency market to drive down those 5 currencies. They're selling them. At the same time, when those currencies go down, the dollar goes up. So this is a way of manipulating the dollar. It hasn't been very successful, and I don't know how much money they got left. That market trades $4.5 trillion a day, $2.5 trillion in dollars alone. So they're not going to have much clout with $500 billion. Might last a few hours. That's why the USDX dollar index, 6 currencies versus the dollar, it continues to go down. On the other hand, the other central banks take the dollars and they put them into their banking system. But what they do with those dollars is they go to the U.S. Treasury auctions and they buy treasuries. Now, in both instances, that is the sale of the foreign currencies received by the Fed and also in the dollars received by the foreign central banks, once they're used to buy treasuries or to suppress currencies in the currency market, they're monetized. And what that means is they're immediately inflationary. Now, this started last March. In May, inflation started to stick its head up. The PPI, take a look at it. It's up 25% year on year.
Hey, Bob,
the Producer Price Index.
Let's come back on that note. Here's our hard break, and we'll get our legs under us and get our cadence or tempo down here. Let's take a break, which we must do because of our automation system, which is a good thing. And we'll be back with Bob Chapman. Stay right there.
Oh, you're like a child. Oh, but the fire went wild.
Well, we've got to hand it to Bob Chapman for being persistent and a little bit, I'd say, loyal in trying to get through and talk to the Salt Lake City audience. It's important. It's important to understand, to get an interface with somebody who can flesh out what's actually happening rather than throw around rhetoric, which us pundits and Big Mouse on the radio are specializing at. But this is a huge ripoff, it sounds like, Bob. Now, in one instance, they get this cash, they get the American dollar, and they use it to suppress the value of other currencies. Now,
no, it's the Fed who does the suppression of the other currencies to make the dollar go up. The other central banks use the dollars to buy treasuries at the U.S. auctions. And we need about $1 billion a day minimum, and sometimes it's as high as $4 billion a day to keep our machine going. And that's because we have a balance of payments deficit, and besides that, we owe everybody in the world gazillions of dollars. And, you know, the question originally was, under TARP, well, I got to pay all that money back. Well, yes, if they're in business. And what's gone on here is that the Federal Reserve, privately owned by 12 Federal Reserve banks in the United States, regional banks, the most powerful being the New York Fed, which does all the transactions for the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve in Washington is essentially really told what to do by the Federal Open Market Committee, which is a group of people from those banks. And those banks were formed and controlled from 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act was passed by Congress. And so the people who own those banks are bankers from the United States and from Europe, both. And most people don't know that. And that's why Ron Paul, for a number of reasons, has 300 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives on H.R. 1207, which would investigate and audit the Federal Reserve. When the public finds out what they've been doing, they'll just go crazy. And the Fed will be done away with, and that job will go back to the Treasury where it was in the first place prior to the legislation that was passed in 1913.
Where the Constitution,
yes. Mm-hmm. What's that?
Well, where the Constitution places it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Now, we're getting back to TARP. The question is, who got the money? How much did they get?
Yeah.
And what did they do with it? The Federal Reserve will not tell anybody, and a federal district court has ordered them to do so, and they told them to take a hike. Now, if this was the Treasury Department, part of the United States government, I could understand that. But this is a private group of bankers who make gazillions of dollars with the advantage that they have. Now, part of that money goes back every year to the Treasury Department. In fact, I would say most of it. But the point is, they all have inside information. That means every connected brokerage house in New York City and throughout the country, the banks, the insurance companies, who are all wired to these people, they all know what's going on ahead of the American public as the investor.
Well,
and everybody is getting screwed.
The credit is not trickling down, so what are they doing with the money, Bob? Are they buying commodities and real property, or what?
They're gambling in the markets. They're still holding it on their books as assets. They're not lending it out. They're gambling with it.
And that would be the commodities market.
Let me tell you what these banks did. And the Fed sanctioned this. It was the Fed's idea. And what they did is, in normal fractional banking, your bank, let's say it's Citicorp or the Podunk Island Bank of Illinois, they usually, conservatively, lend $8 to $10 for every dollar they have in deposit. Mm-hmm. That is considered prudent banking. Mm-hmm. And that's gone on for centuries. These banks, and brokerage houses as well, have been lending anywhere between 30 and 70 times their asset base. Now, that is an outright casino, and they know they shouldn't be doing that. And that's why the system came down. It came down pointedly with the rating on collateralized debt obligations, which are bonds holding mortgages. They said they were AAA, they were BBB, the difference between a 10 and a 4. Now these bonds, many of them, most of them, instead of being worth par, which is 100, they're worth 10 or 20 or 30 cents on the dollar. They're sitting on the books of these banks and brokerage houses, and so in order to liquefy, they created TARP and lent them money. Then on top of it, and mind you, on top of it now, the Fed created more money out of thin air and is buying $1.7 trillion worth of their toxic garbage. You know, I'd like to talk to this guy you had the conversation with, because I'd bury him. You know, I've been doing this for 50 years. I wanted to debate Alan Greenspan several years ago on CNBC, and Ron Insana, who I know quite well because he started FNN in L.A., which became CNBC, and I knew Ron when he was a kid, getting out of college. And he said the management won't let it because you're a street fighter, you'll destroy him. That's exactly the answer I get from the management. And so this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who lie about everything. They might be in $3,000 suits, but most of them are common criminals. And they've been looting the system for far too long. And incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, I own my own brokerage firm, and I spent 28 years on Wall Street. So this is not some dingbat from East Overshoe telling you what's going on.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I've been doing this for a long time.
If you're just joining us, folks, we finally got Bob on the air with us. We got a phone connection with him, and the difficulty was entirely on our end. Bob was trying hard to get in touch with us. Bob Chapman, let's switch to politics a little bit right now. And that was a great breakdown that you've just done on my question about the TARP, and I really appreciate it. But this H.R. 1207, which is the responsible, working through the system sort of last gasp of we're trying to get the Republic to get a heartbeat again.